Three Idiots is a Bollywood movie from 2009, and according to IMDb, it's apparently one of the best movies ever made. That's how I found out about it. Going to say right now, don't listen to IMDb when it comes to Bollywood movies. I have a lot of reason to believe that voter fraud takes place on that website. What's the movie actually like, coming from someone who's seen it? Well, it's not good. That isn't to say there's nothing good about it. There were some aspects of this movie that I actually quite liked, but overall, let's just say the quality of the movie gives me even more reason to believe that there's been some voter fraud. The first problem is noticeable almost immediately after the movie starts up: the actual filmmaking. It's like every 5 seconds they switch director and editing team, as some sort of way of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what stuck, because the tone and style changes with almost every shot. Within the first 5 minutes, there's a weird sperm animation thing, and a character has one of those dramatic flashbacks with a filter and an echo effect applied, and in both cases, they're the only instance of anything like it in the entire runtime. Sometimes there's just completely random shit like this establishing shot that shows a barren location that no character ever goes to and is never seen again afterwards. Sometimes the lighting is so bad that it makes real-life sets look like bad CG, and the sound is probably the worst aspect of the entire movie. After many of the jokes, they use these really obnoxious cartoony sound effects, I guess to remind the audience that what's happening is supposed to be funny.
ऐड भी भूल गया ओए तेरी इसको मूत्र ये तो मेरे दोस्तों के नाम है
Lieutenant Steve. And for both the musical numbers and the songs that are used in the background, there is no consistency in style, genre, or quality. It ranges from one song that's kind of okay, to mediocre autotune garbage, to almost intolerably saccharine, to 5 minutes of on repeat. And if you were paying really close attention, you may have noticed that this goes on for 3 hours. When's the last time you heard of a coming-of-age comedy longer than an hour and 40 minutes? So the movie is way too long. What do they actually try to do with all that time? Primarily, the movie is a comedy, and they take the same throwing-at-the-wall approach that they took with the filmmaking. Again, the quality ranges, but definitely leans more towards not good, especially thanks to the style of comedy that's most present. Look at these memes. If you find these funny, you'll probably be in stitches watching this movie, because either it had a massive influence on bad internet humor, or bad internet humor had a massive influence on it. I didn't even have to search for these. I've come across all of them just browsing the internet, and I spotted this one which has very similar joke delivery to this scene, these two which are basically jokes lifted almost directly from the movie, and this one straight up uses images of the three main characters. Personally though, I'm not a fan of bad internet humor, so it mostly just annoyed me whenever I was reminded of it. That's not all there is though. What else did this movie throw at the wall? Well, there's a villain that has a lisp.
This is not a philosophy class.
In the opening scene, one of the main guys forgets his pants.
ऐड भी भूल गया ओए तेरी
Oh, and let's not forget the classic, some level of harm befalls upon somebody's private parts. That's a good one. Yeah, most of it's really childish and played out. And then there was this joke where they changed the whole meaning of this guy's speech by altering a few words, but he doesn't realize it because he doesn't speak the language very well. And that was kind of funny at first, but then it went on for about 25 minutes too long. Seriously, without even touching any of the scenes that could be cut out altogether, if you were to cut down all of the jokes and songs that went on for too long to a more appropriate length, that alone would probably shave off most of the extra hour that this movie has in its runtime compared to other genre movies. When the movie isn't trying to be funny, it's trying to send messages. In a good movie, the message it's trying to send is incorporated naturally into the story. They actually do this sometimes in this movie, but then they ruin it by having it immediately be followed by a scene or two completely dedicated to a character just explaining it. Basically, the overall message that the movie is trying to send is that in the school system, the focus tends to be on pressure to do well and not on the education itself, and that's bad. And they really hammer this in. They set up this character who's the biggest Gary Stu I've ever seen. He's top of the class, it's revealed late in the runtime that he becomes one of the most successful engineers in history, the amount of things that he does completely selflessly actually gets to a pretty absurd level, and he's the one that believes that message. And here's the total list of characters that disagree with him in some way. We've got this guy, who's portrayed as an idiot and is the butt of about 90% of the jokes in the movie. Then there's this teacher, who's portrayed as an idiot and also a jerk when he kicks Mr. Perfect out of the class for questioning his methods. And finally, this headmaster character, who's portrayed as an idiot and also finds out that his way of doing things was what caused the death of his own son. Aside from this maybe not being the best way to send a message, this black and white way of presenting things creates another problem. I've seen movies send strange or confusing messages before, but not really in this blatant, hammered-in way. For example, the guy that we're just supposed to listen to tells us that this character is bad because he's materialistic. There is one part where his girlfriend is wearing a watch that has sentimental value to her, but he makes her take it off because he doesn't want to be seen with her wearing a cheap piece of junk or something. And the movie makes a very obvious point about how this is materialistic and bad. But then the same point is made with just as much, if not more, intensity when he gets mad at a character for intentionally pouring soup or some shit all over his clothes and then ironing it on. So it's made very clear, absolutely no level of materialism is okay. If someone's intentionally ruining your stuff, whatever, they're just things. If you're gonna be that extreme about it, then it should also be wrong for his girlfriend to value that watch. Yeah, she values it for a different reason, but at the end of the day, it's still just a material possession. This wouldn't be an issue if they weren't so black and white about it. Probably the worst example of the movie sticking to its guns with these characters are right and these characters are wrong comes towards the end. It's that typical movie moment where the characters are all sitting around depressed and talking about their problems. I guess to give Mr. Perfect something to do other than be perfect, they write in some generic thing about how he doesn't have the courage to confess his love to a girl he likes. So they decide he should go talk to her in her sleep, I guess like in The Sixth Sense. They enter her family's property uninvited in the middle of the night, and while Gary Stu enters the house through a window, the other two just piss around outside, and eventually the girl's father, who happens to be the school headmaster, wakes up and sees the three of them running away, catching one of their faces and correctly assuming who the other two are. The next day, he calls the one he spotted to his office and gives him a choice. Either he'll be expelled, or he can testify to get the other two expelled. This is obviously supposed to be an upsetting moment, but I can't really get behind it. You may or may not know about the Toy Story Black Friday reel. Basically, in the earlier drafts of Toy Story, test audiences weren't very big fans of Woody, most infamously in the scene where Buzz winds up out the window. In the version we're familiar with, Woody intends to get Buzz stuck behind the desk in order to keep him out of sight for a while, and knocking him out the window was an accident. But in the earlier drafts, Woody threw Buzz out the window on purpose, and also, unlike the final draft, showed no signs of remorse for doing so. So even after Woody progressed as a character, test audiences weren't really able to get behind him because what he did was too extreme. I think most people are glad we got the version we ended up with. I bring this up because I think this whole part of the movie could have used that treatment. They're playing it up like, oh, it's so sad, either he's going to be expelled or he has to get his friends expelled. But this isn't over some petty school rule. They broke onto the headmaster's private property and vandalized it. That's not okay. And as a result, it's a little hard for me to feel sorry for them when they get in trouble for it. Well, I've mostly been focusing on the negative aspects so far, but like I mentioned at the beginning, there are some parts of this movie that I actually quite like. After all, when you're throwing this much shit at the wall, once in a while you are going to find something that sticks. I can't deny that there are some unironically funny scenes in this movie. For example, there's one part where two of the main characters wind up in a standoff, and their leverage in the standoff is threatening to pour the other guy's recently deceased father's ashes in the toilet. I found the idea to be pretty morbidly hilarious, and that combined with this actor's pretty great reactions managed to get a good laugh out of me. And it's not just with the humor either. Among all the random shit they do with the filmmaking, they occasionally manage to do something pretty cool. Towards the end of the first musical number, the one actually kind of alright one, the main characters are flying a drone with a camera around, with some POV shots of what they see through the drone's camera. It's all lighthearted and comedic, until through one of these shots, we the audience discover an event that massively changes the tone of everything that's happening, and this is a POV shot, so we're discovering it in the exact same way at the exact same time as the characters. I just thought it was a cool way of giving the audience the same sudden sense of urgency that the characters in the movie had for the next scene. Overall, I can't really bring myself to call this movie terrible. It certainly has a lot of terrible things in it, I think I've made that pretty clear, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't think it had a few redeeming qualities to appreciate. And even without considering those redeeming qualities, I've definitely seen worse.